The Vanishing over Nevada, 1967. In the summer of 1967, the skies above Nevada were filled with the quiet hum of secret flights. Deep in the desert, far from any civilian eyes, the United States Air Force carried out operations so classified that even the families of its personnel were left in the dark. Among the men assigned to these missions was flight engineer Jacob Miller, a 32-year-old veteran whose career was defined by precision, discipline, and loyalty. On the night of June 14th, he boarded a modified Lockheed aircraft for a test flight that was scheduled to last under 2 hours. He never returned. Radar tracked his ascent briefly, and radio communications indicated routine checks. Then, suddenly, all contact vanished. Search teams combed hundreds of square miles, but no wreckage, no aircraft, and no remains were ever found. The official report labeled it a mechanical failure, closed the case, and sealed it under strict classification. To the public, it was an accident. To Miller's colleagues, something didn't add up. He was careful, methodical, and experienced. There was no warning, no distress, and no logical reason for the plane to disappear. Whispers began circulating, sightings of strange lights in the desert, unidentified aircraft moving silently, and unusual electromagnetic readings in the region. Miller's family received vague condolences but no answers. The Air Force claimed the terrain was too dangerous for recovery. Yet private analysis of the coordinates revealed that no crash site existed. The area was restricted, hidden, and heavily patrolled. Documents labeled black held phrases that suggested something more than a routine flight. One entry read, "Unidentified radar anomaly observed at 22:47 hours. Flight path deviation recorded. Status, lost from all channels." If this was an accident, why was it hidden for decades? Why were witnesses silenced? Why did radar operators report anomalies that never appeared in official files? Jacob Miller's disappearance was not just the loss of one man. It was the opening chapter in a story of secrecy, experimental technology, and government operations so hidden that the truth could only be pieced together from whispers, leaked documents, and the desert itself. This is the story of Jacob Miller, the missing airman, whose vanishing over Nevada in 1967 became one of the darkest mysteries in aviation history. Flight engineer Jacob Miller, the man behind the mystery. Before Jacob Miller became a name whispered in classified corridors, he was a man defined by discipline, focus, and technical skill. Born in Wichita, Kansas in 1935, Miller grew up around airplanes. His father worked as an aircraft mechanic, and by the age of 12, Jacob could identify engines and airframes by sound alone. Aviation was not just a career for him, it was a calling. Miller enlisted in the U.S. Air Force in 1955. Within a few years, he rose through the ranks as a flight engineer, known for his calm demeanor, precision, and ability to handle emergency situations that could overwhelm even seasoned pilots. He logged thousands of flight hours, participated in classified test programs, and earned the trust of his superiors for his reliability. He was a man who could be counted on in any situation at any altitude. By 1967, Miller was stationed at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. His assignment was marked only as Special Engineering Duty, a term that even his colleagues did not fully understand. What is known is that he worked with experimental aircraft, often flying missions into restricted airspace far beyond public maps. The nature of these flights was secret. The purpose was even more mysterious. In the weeks before his disappearance, Miller's behavior subtly changed. His wife, and would later recall that he seemed distracted, often staring out the window at the Nevada desert with a faraway look. When asked about his assignments, he would deflect, speaking only of routine checks and tests. In a letter found later, he wrote to his younger brother, "Some of what we are doing out here doesn't feel right. They say it is for the good of the country, but I'm starting to wonder if anyone truly knows what we are testing." The letter was never mailed. Miller's co-workers noticed changes too. One technician recalled that he had expressed concern about unstable readings in the aircraft's engines. Days before the flight, the technician was reassigned. He later admitted that he was told to forget that test program ever existed. Another colleague reported that Miller's last few flight logs contained references to variable anomaly windows, terms not found in standard Air Force manuals. Despite the growing tension, Miller remained professional. He attended base functions, completed maintenance checks, and continued his duties without complaint. He had plans for a short leave in mid-June, intending to spend time with his wife and young son. He never made it home. On the day before the final flight, Miller met with civilian contractors at a restricted hangar for a meeting logged as experimental systems review. The meeting lasted less than an hour. The following evening, he boarded the modified Lockheed aircraft for what would become his last mission. There are small but significant details that raise questions about the circumstances surrounding that night. The aircraft serial number had been altered recently, an unusual practice for active test vehicles. Miller's co-pilot was replaced unexpectedly hours before the flight, with no official explanation. And the flight plan itself bypassed the normal approval chain, filed manually under a code only a few in the base could access. Miller's personal notebook, always kept in his flight jacket, was never recovered. After his disappearance, his personnel records were heavily redacted. His superiors praised him as a model officer, yet no one could explain why he had been selected for this specific mission or why the flight followed such irregular protocols. Jacob Miller's life before the disappearance paints the portrait of a man caught between duty and secrecy, a man who followed orders, but may have unknowingly been drawn into a mission that exceeded human comprehension. His disappearance would not only erase him from public record, but also ignite a series of events that exposed the darkest corners of Nevada's classified operations. In the next chapter, we examine the night of the final flight, tracing each moment leading up to Miller's vanishing over the desert skies. The final flight. June 14, 1967. The desert sky above Nevada was calm, a clear night with minimal wind, stretching over hundreds of miles of barren terrain. At Nellis Air Force Base, the hangars were quiet, lit only by dim emergency lights. Inside Hangar 4, a modified Lockheed aircraft awaited its mission. The flight was scheduled for exactly 21:30 hours, described in official logs as a high-altitude systems calibration test. The true purpose, known only to a handful of officers, was never made public. Jacob Miller arrived early, carrying his personal notebook and standard flight equipment. Witnesses later recalled his calm, focus, methodical pre-flight checks, and quiet demeanor. He verified engine systems, cross-checked instruments, and reviewed the flight plan manually, a step rarely required. His co-pilot, Lieutenant David Keene, completed his checklist and signed off on the aircraft at 21:35. The plane taxied to the runway and took off precisely at 21:58 hours. For the first 30 minutes, all communications were routine. Miller reported stable engine readings, correct altitude, and normal system performance. Ground control confirmed his position, and radar showed a smooth ascent. At 22:47 hours, the first anomaly occurred. Radar operators recorded a brief interference, a total signal loss lasting 14 seconds. When contact briefly returned, the aircraft was off its planned course, several miles north of the projected path. 4 minutes later, all radar, telemetry, and radio signals ceased. Search operations were mobilized immediately. Aircraft were scrambled, helicopters scanned the area, and ground teams combed the desert. But there was no wreckage, no parachutes, no trace of the aircraft. One pilot reported seeing a faint, circular glow hovering in the desert, disappearing within seconds. Another witness, miles away, claimed to hear a low hum followed by silence. These reports were noted in internal files but never made public. The official Air Force reports cited a high-altitude systems malfunction leading to loss of airframe integrity, yet no debris was ever found. Coordinates in the report were inaccurate, pointing to a location far beyond the approved testing range. Civilian meteorological data from the night showed clear skies and no turbulence, contradicting claims of weather-related failure. Behind closed doors, whispers spread. Some personnel believed Miller had encountered a test of electromagnetic propulsion. Others suggested he may have crossed into restricted experimental airspace, possibly encountering unknown aerial technology. The sudden, total disappearance of the aircraft defied all conventional explanation. Within 48 hours, the Air Force classified the mission as lost, terminating public search operations. Miller's family received vague information, told only that he had been lost in the line of duty during a critical operation. No remains, no flight data, and no final recordings were ever provided. The radar anomaly, local witness accounts, and disappearance of all evidence raise questions that remain unanswered to this day. Jacob Miller did not simply vanish from the sky. He vanished from reality as it was recorded, leaving only a trail of secrecy, speculation, and unexplained phenomena over the Nevada desert. The events of that night would set the stage for a far-reaching cover-up, the topic of the next chapter. The cover-up begins. In the hours following Jacob Miller's disappearance, Nellis Air Force Base moved quickly to contain the situation. By early morning, internal communications were restricted, with all outgoing calls rerouted through command approval. Personnel were instructed that a classified systems test had been compromised. No details were provided, and those not cleared for sensitive information were explicitly warned against asking questions. Military police set up checkpoints around the northern range. Vehicles patrolled roads leading into the desert, and anyone attempting to approach the area was turned back. Civilians living nearby recalled being stopped and told to stay indoors, while unmarked military trucks moved swiftly across the landscape. The Air Force told the public that the missing aircraft was lost due to routine mechanical failure, with no further comment. Flight logs from the previous 24 hours were confiscated and sealed. Radar tapes were collected and replaced with blank reels. The control tower operator on duty during Miller's final flight was reassigned to a base in Utah and instructed never to speak of the event. Years later, under anonymity, he claimed that radar showed 2 blips merging, then one disappearing. His statement was never entered into any official report. Miller's wife, Anne, received a formal visit from 2 officers. They offered condolences but refused to provide specifics. When asked where her husband's aircraft had gone, one officer said only, "That information is restricted under national security clearance." Her letters and calls to the base were returned unopened or redirected. Within weeks, the public search was quietly closed. The official justification cited hazardous terrain, despite meteorological records confirming clear skies. Personnel who had observed unusual anomalies were told to align with the official story. Those who questioned orders faced reassignment, dismissal, or the threat of court-martial. By July 1967, Miller's name had been removed from active rosters. His personnel file was reclassified under a secret code, and all references to the flight were redacted. Independent investigators later found that equipment salvaged after the disappearance, twisted metal fragments and burn panels, was transported in unmarked trucks to a restricted facility that did not officially exist at the time. Internal Air Force documents referred to narrative consolidation, ensuring all personnel statements matched the approved version of events. The story presented to the public became uniform. Jacob Miller's aircraft malfunctioned, crashed in a remote area, and was unrecoverable. All anomalies, radar distortions, and eyewitness accounts were systematically suppressed. Some journalists attempted to uncover the truth. One reporter received an anonymous letter claiming that debris had been found but removed by orders from higher command. The letter described scorch marks inconsistent with a typical crash. When the journalist published his findings, the newspaper faced legal action, and the source was never identified. By the end of 1967, the disappearance had faded from public memory. But within the military, it remained a cautionary tale. The operation had been erased from records, but fragments of evidence hinted at something far beyond a simple accident. The cover-up was thorough, leaving only one certainty. Jacob Miller had disappeared into a mission that the world was never meant to see. The events of this cover-up set the stage for whispers and rumors, the seeds of a mystery that would endure for decades, and a shadow of secrecy that would lead investigators toward Nevada's most classified operations. Whispers from the desert. In the weeks following Jacob Miller's disappearance, the Nevada desert was alive with quiet, unexplained activity. Locals reported unusual lights flickering across the horizon, moving in patterns that defied conventional aircraft. Some described spheres of white and orange light hovering above the ground before vanishing in an instant. Others heard low-frequency hums, vibrations in the sand, and sudden electrical disturbances affecting radios and household appliances. Military patrols increased. Unmarked vehicles traversed remote desert roads, and signs warning of restricted areas multiplied overnight. Ranchers, hikers, and a few curious travelers were intercepted by personnel without insignia, told to leave the area immediately. The official explanation remained unchanged: routine training exercises. But the pattern of activity suggested something far more deliberate. Former base personnel, speaking decades later under anonymity, described a strange atmosphere following Miller's flight. It was as if the desert itself was watching, one technician recalled. Airspace maps were redrawn, flight corridors disappeared, and radar operators were warned to report only pre-approved anomalies. Anything outside the script was ignored or erased from records. Local eyewitnesses became part of a story the public would never see. A pilot flying near Rachel, Nevada, described a sudden radio blackout coinciding with a faint circular glow in the sky. Another witness, a truck driver on Highway 93, saw a metallic object hovering above the desert before accelerating at impossible speed. His statement was requested by military officials and then classified. No official report acknowledged these sightings. Over time, whispers from the desert grew among civilians and insiders alike. Some believed the lights and disturbances were linked to experimental propulsion tests connected to Miller's final mission. Others speculated on a more extraordinary possibility, that the aircraft had encountered unknown aerial phenomena, something entirely outside human technology. Evidence of these anomalies appears in sporadic declassified documents and private testimonies. Internal memos mention unidentified radar anomalies, unexplained electromagnetic interference, and temporary personnel disorientation. None of this reached the public. The official narrative maintained that Jacob Miller's aircraft simply malfunctioned, despite all contrary evidence. Even decades later, the desert retains its secrets. Satellites, civilian aircraft, and remote sensing studies have noted lingering traces of electromagnetic irregularities over certain Nevada sectors. Areas once associated with Miller's disappearance remain off-limits, tightly controlled, and monitored. The whispers from the desert are more than stories. They're the echoes of an event deliberately hidden from history. They suggest that what happened over Nevada in 1967 was not an accident, nor a simple technological failure, but a glimpse into operations so secret that even today, the truth remains buried beneath the sands. These anomalies, the suppressed reports, and the eyewitness accounts point to a reality that the Air Force has never publicly acknowledged. And at the center of it all stands Jacob Miller, the airman who vanished without a trace. The secret Nevada operation. The disappearance of Jacob Miller was never just an isolated incident. Behind a veil of routine military exercises lay a program shrouded in secrecy, one that few outside the upper echelons of the Air Force or the Atomic Energy Commission were ever allowed to acknowledge. Internal documents, later partially declassified, hint at the existence of a classified initiative referred to only by the code name Project Vortex. Project Vortex was designed to test advanced propulsion systems, radar invisibility technologies, and electromagnetic energy fields capable of affecting aircraft and equipment in unprecedented ways. The program operated in complete isolation over the Nevada desert, often overlapping with known experimental zones such as Area 51 and the Tonopah Test Range. Few personnel knew the full scope of the project. Most were only given their direct assignments and warned not to discuss operations with anyone outside their clearance level. Jacob Miller's final flight intersected with one of these zones. Radar logs show that the aircraft's trajectory deviated into coordinates that were unassigned to conventional test runs. The official story claimed pilot error or mechanical failure. Yet the location and nature of the anomaly did not correspond to any known aircraft performance issues. Internal memos reference variable electromagnetic interference and unaccounted flight path deviations, but these were redacted from all public-facing reports. According to several anonymous sources, Project Vortex involved testing equipment that could manipulate localized electromagnetic fields. Witnesses described low-frequency hums, lights in unusual formations, and instruments registering readings far beyond normal parameters. The program's secrecy extended to the point where even flight engineers like Miller were provided only with partial information regarding their missions. On the night of June 14th, the mission assigned to Miller may have gone beyond the intended parameters. Some speculate that the aircraft entered a temporary, unstable energy field created during testing. Radar data from the base shows a brief distortion that coincides with the aircraft's disappearance. The exact nature of this field remains unknown. Officials later described it internally as a high-energy anomaly with nonlinear characteristics. To the public, this was never mentioned. Following Miller's disappearance, Project Vortex protocols were intensified. Personnel who had contact with the missing aircraft were reassigned. All physical evidence, including flight logs and maintenance records, was either confiscated or destroyed. Surveillance over the desert increased, and airspace restrictions were expanded, effectively erasing any possibility of civilian observation. Despite the cover-up, fragments of information survived. Leaked documents and eyewitness accounts described the recovery of aircraft components, unusual scorch marks, and equipment showing signs of electromagnetic exposure. Some technicians who were later interviewed reported equipment behaving as though it was alive, a phrase that was officially dismissed as hyperbole, but which continues to appear in declassified notes from the era. Project Vortex remained active for years, with missions continuing under varying code names. Miller's disappearance became one of several unexplained incidents within the program, all hidden behind layers of secrecy. The exact purpose of these experiments and the risks involved are still unknown. Jacob Miller's flight was never just a test. It was a collision between a human pilot and technology operating beyond contemporary understanding. His disappearance was not a failure of engineering, but a reminder of the dangers inherent in programs that exist outside oversight, outside law, and outside public knowledge. The true scope of Project Vortex and what may have occurred over Nevada on that night in 1967 remains locked in classified files. Only the desert, the radar blips, and the occasional whispered testimony hint at the reality, a reality that continues to elude researchers, historians, and the family of Jacob Miller. The missing records. In the aftermath of Jacob Miller's disappearance, one of the most striking elements was the complete absence of official documentation. Flight logs, radar tapes, maintenance reports, and personnel records were either classified, redacted, or entirely removed from the archives. What remained were fragments, inconsistencies, and lines in reports that hinted at events far more complex than a simple mechanical failure. Personnel directly involved in the mission reported that their files were altered. Names of technicians were replaced with codes. Aircraft serial numbers were reassigned. Communication transcripts were partially erased, leaving gaps where Miller's final transmissions should have been. Even radar operators' notes contained inconsistencies. Timestamps missing, coordinates shifted, and references to anomalies that were never publicly acknowledged. Some of these documents later surfaced through leaks, showing that Miller's aircraft may have crossed into areas designated as restricted experimental corridors, zones monitored by multiple agencies beyond the Air Force, including the Atomic Energy Commission. An internal memo noted, "Flight path deviation entered uncharted electromagnetic zone. Subject status, non-recoverable. All records classified X, 93. Requests for these records by historians, journalists, and civilian investigators were consistently denied. The Freedom of Information Act yielded heavily redacted files, often with entire sections blacked out. One researcher, who spent years piecing together Miller's last mission, noted that even declassified radar tapes were altered. Blips appeared to vanish mid-transmission, suggesting deliberate manipulation of the data. Survivor testimonies, though scarce, confirmed the level of secrecy enforced. Base technicians recalled receiving instructions to report only what is authorized, with any deviation potentially resulting in reassignment or legal action. Maintenance logs were rewritten, sometimes hours after events had occurred, to reflect a version of reality that aligned with official narratives. Evidence suggests that the missing records were not simply lost or destroyed. Instead, they were carefully curated to remove traces of the anomalies Miller encountered. This included electromagnetic data, witness statements describing unusual lights, and references to aircraft behavior inconsistent with conventional flight physics. Even internal memos referring to Project Vortex were initially marked for permanent suppression. Civilian investigators who later attempted to reconstruct the events faced an uphill battle. Each document recovered raised more questions than answers. Coordinates, timestamps, and aircraft designations often conflicted, implying that multiple layers of information have been altered or overwritten. Researchers concluded that Miller's disappearance was enveloped in a systematic effort to erase the mission from all official memory. The missing records are more than paperwork. They represent the intentional erasure of human life from the official history of aviation. They hint at encounters with technology, phenomena, or experimental conditions that the public was never meant to know. Without these records, the truth of what happened over Nevada in June 1967 remains elusive, surviving only in whispers, partial testimonies, and the shadows cast by the desert night. Jacob Miller's story is preserved not through official documentation, but through the fragments left behind, the memories of those who were there, and the unanswered questions that continue to haunt Nevada's restricted airspace. The theories. Decades after Jacob Miller vanished over the Nevada desert, countless theories have emerged, attempting to explain the unexplainable. Each offers a different lens, yet none can fully account for the disappearance, the missing records, and the anomalies reported that night. One of the earliest and most persistent theories centers on experimental technology. Project Vortex, the classified program Miller was involved with, reportedly tested advanced propulsion systems and electromagnetic energy fields. Some experts suggest the aircraft may have encountered a localized energy field capable of disrupting avionics and radar signals. This could explain the sudden disappearance from all tracking systems, the off-course trajectory, and the failure of conventional search efforts. The theory posits that Miller's plane was effectively phased out of standard detection, though no concrete evidence confirms this. Another theory involves restricted aerial phenomena. Radar operators, civilian witnesses, and internal memos hint at objects in the desert sky that did not correspond to conventional aircraft. Reports of glowing spheres, silent movement, and rapid acceleration beyond known physics fuel speculation that Miller may have encountered unknown aerial technology, or even extraterrestrial craft. The timing of these anomalies aligns precisely with the final moments of his flight, yet official records deny any unusual activity. A third perspective focuses on government concealment and cover-ups. The meticulous erasure of records, reassignment of personnel, and suppression of witness statements suggest a deliberate attempt to hide something far beyond a routine accident. Some researchers argue that the disappearance was used as a case study for testing secrecy protocols, ensuring that information about experimental programs or dangerous technologies never reached the public. In this context, Miller may have become an unintentional casualty of classified operations. Other explanations consider environmental and atmospheric anomalies. Certain classified meteorological reports indicate low-frequency electromagnetic disturbances over the Nevada desert that night. These could have interfered with aircraft systems or even created spatial distortions. While mainstream science remains skeptical, These readings cannot be entirely dismissed, especially given the unusual radar and radio behavior recorded at the time. A final, darker theory posits human error within experimental programs, combined with secrecy. It suggests that Miller's aircraft encountered equipment or phenomena beyond safety thresholds, leading to an unrecoverable situation. The subsequent cover-up, deletion of records, and restriction of information would then serve to protect those responsible for the technology, the operation, or both. Across all theories, one element remains consistent. Jacob Miller vanished without a trace. No wreckage, no remains, no final recordings. Only fragments of evidence, eyewitness accounts, and hints within redacted files suggest that something occurred that night far beyond conventional understanding. The absence of concrete answers fuel speculation. Each theory, whether technological, extraterrestrial, environmental, or conspiratorial, highlights one truth. Miller's disappearance remains one of the most enduring mysteries in Nevada's history, a testament to the limits of official transparency and the potential dangers of operating in the shadows. As these theories circulate, the desert continues to guard its secrets, and the questions about what really happened to Jacob Miller linger, unanswered, yet persistent. The return of the signal. Decades after Jacob Miller vanished, traces of his final mission began to resurface, fragments of radar data, declassified memos, and eyewitness accounts that had survived the years of suppression. The term return of the signal refers not to the aircraft itself, but to the faint echoes of evidence, the anomalies, and the revelations that challenged the official narrative. In the early 1990s, a series of declassified documents revealed inconsistencies in flight logs and radar tracking. Analysts noted that several blips recorded that night had been erased or misfiled, suggesting deliberate manipulation of data. These signals, once hidden, provided tantalizing clues that Miller's aircraft had not simply disappeared in a conventional sense. Eyewitness accounts also reemerged. Ranchers, pilots, and military personnel began speaking on the record, decades later, describing strange lights, unexplained sounds, and electromagnetic disturbances consistent with what had been recorded internally at the time. Some suggested that the aircraft had temporarily entered a high-energy field, an area where conventional instruments failed to function. Others speculated that Miller may have encountered a technology unknown even to the Air Force. The recovered data revealed a troubling pattern. Repeated interference at specific coordinates within the Nevada desert, exactly where Miller's final flight had deviated. Radar logs showed blips appearing and disappearing, equipment registering readings beyond standard ranges, and communications becoming garbled in short bursts. These anomalies matched witness descriptions and supported theories of electromagnetic or experimental propulsion involvement. Private investigators and aviation historians pieced together fragments of Miller's mission, forming a narrative that conflicted with the official story. The pattern of redacted files, missing equipment reports, and reassignment of personnel suggested that whatever occurred was considered too sensitive to share publicly. Every recovered signal acted as a faint thread through the veil of secrecy, revealing the scale of the operation behind his disappearance. Even now, researchers studying Nevada's restricted zones note ongoing anomalies in airspace and electromagnetic readings. These residual signals, though subtle, echo the events of 1967, hinting that Miller's flight may have encountered a phenomenon that transcended conventional flight parameters. The desert, in essence, continues to communicate, leaving only faint traces of one man's last mission. Jacob Miller's disappearance is not simply a story of a missing airman. It is a story of erased events, hidden technologies, and the deliberate concealment of information that could alter our understanding of aviation, physics, and national security. The return of the signal is a reminder that truth, no matter how deeply buried, can never be fully silenced. It leaves traces, clues, and whispers, demanding that those willing to search look beyond official narratives, question redactions, and face the unsettling reality of what may have transpired over the Nevada desert. The dark truth that never dies. The story of Jacob Miller does not end with his disappearance. It extends into the shadows of secrecy, the hidden corridors of classified programs, and the silent Nevada desert that has guarded its secrets for decades. His flight, his vanishing, and the subsequent cover-up are reminders of the unknown forces that exist when human technology intersects with experiments beyond our comprehension. Radar blips, missing records, eyewitness accounts, and the whispers of Project Vortex all point to a reality deliberately obscured from public view. Jacob Miller was more than a pilot or a flight engineer. He was a witness, unknowing or unwilling, to forces and programs that the world was never meant to see. His disappearance remains one of the most enduring enigmas in aviation history, a story of a man lost not only to the desert, but to secrecy itself. The dark truth behind the missing airman is not only about one flight or one man. It is about the systems that operate beyond oversight, the layers of silence that protect classified operations, and the mysteries that persist in the spaces where light does not reach. As years pass, new evidence may surface, whistleblowers may speak, and declassified files may reveal fragments of the truth. But until that day comes, the disappearance of Jacob Miller stands as a warning, a testament to the unknown, a symbol of the limits of knowledge, and a story that continues to haunt the Nevada desert. The airman may be gone, but the questions remain. And in those questions lies the enduring shadow of the dark truth that never dies.